Good afternoon. It's Thursday, the 5th of November 2015, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Girish. With me in the studio, Mike Robinson, and we are going to be joined by live Skype link by Mickey Summers, who will be talking about child abuse issues in Nottingham and elsewhere. And he is together with Mark Ceylon, who's been supporting that cause in a very big way and, of course, producing many of the excellent videos that are now available on YouTube. But before we get on to the subject of child abuse, just a quick report on the weather. Of course, it is November the 5th, and as so often happens, we've got some pretty appalling weather across the UK at the moment. Glasgow, grey and dingy, Rhondda, Plymouth, Nottingham not looking too good. But I do believe that the forecast is for the rain to ease off a bit later so that the November the 5th celebrations can go ahead. We'll be producing an exclusive on that very subject, Guy Fawkes, November the 5th, a little bit later in the news today. But let's start off with a basic question of trust. Can we trust the British government in anything it says? UK Column thinks not, and part of our evidence for this is the fact that it is blindingly obvious the British government is covering up child abuse, not only by senior politicians, but by VIPs within the establishment. And thank you very much to the person who sent through this video clip to do with MP John Mann standing up in one of the Westminster Committee rooms where he was going to be talking about the Wanless report and child abuse. And we just thought it was interesting to have a look at some of the clips from this because it's very revealing. Well, first of all, the committee chairman, the lady sent a picture here, effectively warned him about sub judice, that he wasn't, of course, allowed to mention any names. He wasn't allowed to do anything which could possibly interrupt or disrupt any of the police investigations going on. So you stand up to talk about the serious issue of child abuse in UK Parliament and parliamentary buildings, and the first thing you get is a pretty severe warning. But it wasn't that which caught the attention of our viewer who sent this footage in to us. It was the fact that as John Mann was preparing to give his talk, the room cleared with an almost indecent haste. So this was the picture of the room taken while other members of Parliament were speaking on their various issues. And then if we just scroll through, we can see people getting up ready to leave, and they're in a big hurry to get out. So that by the time John Mann speaks, here he is, almost in an empty room, apart from the officials, of course, who had to stay there in order to hear what he says. So what is British Parliament's view on child abuse? Well, they consign it as a conspiracy theory. It never happened. If it did happen, it was all in the past. And let's just have a look at what John Mann said to that empty room. He said, effectively, I've paraphrased this, there's no conspiracy theory. In 1988 in Lambeth, I was told of boys over 16 being cajoled into prostitution. Details were given to the police. I was told about Dolphin Square. Details were given to the police. They said that someone high up had curtailed the investigation. Clive Driscoll came to see me in 1994. He was taken off the investigation. In 1980, the Coronation Building investigation was stopped by Special Branch. So John Mann, without beating around the bush, is talking about factual information, police officers coming to him at various times in his career to say that investigations into child abuse at high level were closed down either by senior police or by members of the establishment and the government. Well, one of the people he named was this gentleman, George Kennedy Young, who was the deputy director of MI6, now deceased. But this is one of the names that John Mann revealed and said that this gentleman was manipulating people in places of power by the use, amongst others, of paedophile rings. So that brings us to the point of saying to Mickey Summers, welcome to UK Column News. You have suffered abuse yourself in the system. You've now been campaigning for quite some time for justice for child abuse survivors. Your target's Nottingham City Council. What can you tell us about the latest events in Nottingham?
Well, without going into the latest things about Nottingham, going back to that John Mann video, we had a similar scenario on September the 8th last year, when myself, Mark, and several others stormed the council building. And we told them then that I'd come all the way from New York, and I named Ian Currier. Ian Currier is a liar. And I'd come all the way from New York to challenge him. We did the same at the county council. And what happened on both occasions? They all left the room. And we need to ask the question why. They still won't answer the questions why. But what they did after September the 8th last year was put a gag on me, basically. They denied me accessing any services from the council. And that was orchestrated by one Alison Machalska, the one who's the head of the social services. She was brought in from Humberside on East Riding after failing with baby F. Now, she's got a history behind her. And I'm going to tell the viewers today, she's got blood on her hands, because last year she promised myself, Diane Hawley, my wife Lorraine Rizzo, Mandy Coupland, Chris Guest, that she was going to provide support for this survivor. Tragically, that survivor is no longer with us. But Alison Machalska, I'm coming for you, right? And I am going to personally make you accountable, right? They can put all the rubbish they like out on the BBC that they're supporting survivors. The only people they're supporting is themselves and their salaries. They are disgusting and beyond belief.
Well, Mickey, you've raised some excellent points there, of course, because yes, indeed, that video clip did show Nottingham City Council chamber emptying. When it got too hot, you and others were asking questions about the cover-up of the abuse of children. They couldn't wait to get out of the chamber. And this is the pattern that we see. If they can't answer the question, they run and hide. I'll just bring on screen this BBC clip, since you've mentioned them. This is
that's Ian Currier's house.
I'm sorry, I missed that.
That is Ian Currier's house, the chief executive of Nottingham City Council. I promised him in that before we stormed the council house that if he lied to me, I would come from New York. I would bring stuff to the council at Loxley House. I would bring it to his councillors. I would disrupt his main council meetings. And if he carries on lying, I would bring it to his front door. I'm a man of my word, and there's the evidence to prove that I am a man of my word. We brought it to him on Sunday morning at 10 o'clock, and all his neighbours will say is, you can't bring that stuff round here. We don't need this on a Sunday morning. Well, we don't need to be abused and then lied to.
I'll tell you what as well, though, his wife saw what was going on and parked 2 roads away. Just so happened she parked right behind our car. That's how we knew she parked so far away. Then she walked down the road and pretended she didn't live there. Why would you do that if you'd done nothing wrong?
Well, Mark, this is the power, isn't it, of peaceful demonstration. But of course, that headline, if Mike, you can just pop that one back on screen. We've got BBC News here. Nottingham City Council takes out injunction to silence campaigner. If we just hold that on screen, they said Mr. Summers, who's been at the centre of a campaign to uncover child abuse in Nottinghamshire, had claimed he was being silenced. And they then said that Nottinghamshire Police currently had 2 investigations, Operations Daybreak and Xeris, into allegations of historic child abuse at care homes across the country. I've said there no proper investigative journalism by the BBC. Of course, it's more important for you, Mickey, than just a campaign because you were abused. But watch the change in headline. Here we are. Nottingham City Council drops an injunction against sex abuse campaigner. So what was the cause of this sudden change in heart by Nottingham City Council?
Well, the thing about it is, it all centred on the violation of my human rights. David Hollis, the retired Army Colonel who heads our Nottingham CSA Inquiry Action Group, put out about my human rights being violated and the rights of survivors, to force out the truth. we've done all that we needed to do, and everything that was in that injunction were things where either I've called the police or they've called the police, and there's no crime. So what they wanted to try and do was get a double jeopardy and try and use the ASBO laws that they have by the county court to try and silence me, because the police have already said no crime. But in the case of Ian Currier, he took it a step too far, but I never responded to it. What he did, the following day after we went to his house, he complained to the police. Now, the police had no address for me as far as where I was staying. The only address they had for me on record was my last known address to them in Auckland Road, Crystal Palace, my New York address, and an address in Purley in Surrey where I'd been staying when I first got back to the UK. They sent the police round to Mandy's house about me attending in Currier's house the day before. Now, the only way that the police could have got that information as to where I was staying was via the council. They were the only people that had that address. Now, myself and Mark went to the police in Nottingham to report a crime. They didn't want to know. They have a strategic partnership. That strategic partnership is a conspiracy to pervert the course of justice. And my message for Chris Eyre, John Collins, Ian Currier, your corruption is going to come to an end, and we're going to make it come to an end. We've got a catalogue of stuff connected to Daybreak, connected to Xeres. We're going to expose the whole lot.
Mickey, thank you for that. I'm going to have to watch the clock carefully because I've got quite a few questions I want to ask you. Just before I come on to some of those, Mark, can I say you're somebody who has relatively recently come up against the child abuse issue. You've been great. You've been out there filming, supporting Mickey, and putting a lot of information up onto YouTube. What's your feeling about the police and the councils and the way they react? You've got, if you like, a little bit of distance from the main subject to the abuse, but how have you found the authorities when Mickey and others have been trying to campaign for the truth?
It's very simple. They just cover each other's back and make sure that nothing comes out. If they can stop it, they will do. It's been a battle, but I've been battling the city council for a long time. Way before I met Mickey, but I didn't know Mickey before that. But I've been putting out their corruption for a long, long time, and anyone that's been following what I've been doing can see it. I don't lie. I don't make things up. I put out the truth. They don't like it, and they do everything they can to shut me down. They managed to get 10 videos of mine blocked in the UK. However, I put out how you could watch them anyway. And I will be putting them out again, and I'll just be taking out their details, which was the main excuse they used to shut my video channels down. Right,
so you were saying quite a few of those videos blocked, and they're blocked because presumably you're getting too close to the truth.
All we were simply doing was naming those that we knew were involved. And initially they let it go, and they waited till they decided they had enough. Then they got a solicitor to get onto YouTube to not take them down, but to simply block them in the UK. So you could watch them anywhere else in the world. You just couldn't watch them in the UK.
Yeah. Well, I know that Mike Robinson will be moving on a little bit to censorship in a minute. So this is part of the overall picture we're seeing in UK. But Mickey, just come back to you. Can you just give us a summary for people who maybe haven't come up against what's happening in Nottingham? What is the situation over child abuse investigations? The police keep claiming that Daybreak is still open. We've got this other investigation, Xeres, into children's homes outside of the immediate Nottingham area. What is going on? Do you think there is an investigation or not?
I'd say they might, on the front of it, show that they're doing an investigation. There's 3 investigations, actually, Brian. There's an investigation by the Independent Police Complaints Commission, who we've all got our own views about, into their failure to investigate my case in 2003. That should be drawing to a conclusion quite soon. And then maybe if there's not too much corruption, we might see where Daybreak should have started. But to inform you more about Operation Ceres, the spin-off to Operation Daybreak, myself and Mark, through an insider that we've got at the council, were told about a meeting between Alison Michalska, Steve Edwards and Superintendent Ellen Chamberlain, that the numbers were getting too high on Daybreak, right, and they needed to suppress it. So what did they do? They did what we'd been told. They started a new investigation called Ceres. It's just part of the cover-up. And we know what they're doing quite often, long before the public know what they're doing. All we do is put that information out and ask the questions.
Right. And you've had a lot of support by a gentleman called Mr. Hollis. And I think at one stage he was being promised that child abuse survivors would be brought into the internal investigations by Nottingham City Council. What's actually happened with respect to that promise?
Well, David went in on July the 1st to meet with Alison Michalska, Steve Edwards, who was substituted by somebody else, and Superintendent Helen Chamberlain. Now, following our meeting with the Crime Commissioner, Paddy Tipping, we were led to believe that we were going to sort out the terms of reference for an independent public inquiry. Now, we've been told by our council insider that they'd already started an internal review. We got confirmation of that on July the 1st. Now, they knew that there would be consequences because I wouldn't have that at all. And that was the reason why the injunction was brought out. They knew the consequences were coming, so they started the injunction just to gag me and try and silence me for a while. But the injunction's gone. I'm not going to be quiet. I won't lie down. And out of principle, I don't care if I go to jail. My message for them is, if you take me out, 2 more will come. Take 2 out, 4 more will come, because we're coming for you and we don't care. Justice is coming too.
Well, Mickey, I totally agree. I think this is the strength of when enough people are clamouring for the truth to come out and they're not going away. This is a huge problem for the authorities. They're practiced at closing things down one case at a time. So the more people out there, the better. Just another question for you. I have personally been highly suspicious of the Justice Goddard CSA inquiry. I have got letters which initially she never speaks. I get letters from a lady who I believe works directly for the Home Office. But those letters say effectively that Justice Goddard's inquiry is not able to protect child abuse survivors and whistleblowers from harassment from councils, public bodies, and indeed the police. And in what I regard as a ridiculous irony, what they're saying is that where people are being harassed by the police, they're simply reporting it back to the police. So if I am particularly cynical about the Goddard inquiry, I think you are a bit more optimistic. Where do you think Justice Goddard is at the moment?
It's going to be a case of wait and see, but the interactions that we've had, and we did meet with the Goddard team, we met with some of the policymakers, and we hammered home quite a few points that we needed to put across, things that we weren't totally happy with, and that these things have all been taken back. We're scheduled to meet with them probably at the end of this month, and we'll get a more clearer picture from then. David Hollis, well, he's done wonders, and he's the one that's got Nottingham on the agenda. We're really hoping and praying that Nottingham becomes one of the cases that they do a big review on, because I believe that if Nottingham gets taken down the way Rotherham did, we can get justice in Nottingham. We're hoping that we become one of the test cases that they run before the main investigation gets taken on. And we will then get the equivalent of what we wanted in the beginning, a public inquiry. But should that not happen, we are still going to continue our fight for an independent public inquiry here in Nottingham. And after the injunction thing went on in court the other day, as part of the agreement that I came to, over that injunction was a clear gateway to us to have a representative that we can engage with to get dialogue, to try and get survivors' input into that inquiry that they've already started. The inquiry that they've started is a farce, and we know it, but at least we can try and get our input and expose, because what will happen out of that inquiry, it will have to go public, and anything that's put in there will have to go out there. So we're still working on it, and the people behind the scenes, they're doing their little bit, and we're just going to crack on as best we can. But doing what John Mann did earlier this year in outing somebody, today I'm going to out the former regional director of Nottingham City and County Social Services, Alan Smith. He is my alleged child rapist.
Not alleged. You were there. You know he reached.
Well, the police say alleged, right? So we'll run with what they want to run with. Now, I reported this a very long time ago, and they've done absolutely nothing. Now, as far as every arrest that they made on Operation Daybreak, there's always been a press release the day after, i.e. a 56-year-old man was brought in for questioning and released on bail pending further inquiry. Since Alan Smith, there has been a new news media blackout. We had a recent arrest in Nottingham, Christopher Metcalfe. Same media blackout. What I can tell you about Metcalfe is that he was a school teacher that had previous convictions. How does somebody with convictions get through the things that are meant to be in place for safeguarding? He got through the same way as Jock Bowley did, who was a teacher employed by the county council, exposed for paedophilia in the 60s and reinstated to reoffend Nottingham City School in the 1970s.
And don't forget, there was a Leicester teacher that got locked away recently as well.
They're all beginning to surface now. There's been another lot of survivors that have come to us this week on Skegby Hall. They're coming to us before they go to the police. So the question has to be asked: who do people trust? They trust us over the police.
Well, that's Mickey. That's absolutely not surprising. Just one quick question. Have you had any BBC journalist reporter come to you to investigate your abuse and why you're campaigning?
We've had some pretty good interactions from Jerry Bull at East Midlands today. He's just been slaughtered by our whistleblower, Joni Cameron Blair, and myself over a report over the Nottinghamshire County Council. And there are a few other things that are pending that I can't talk about that are going to be seriously investigated. From conversations that I've had with Jeremy Ball, I don't think he's too happy at responses that have come from both the city and the county council. They can carry on lying to cover their sorry arses, but at the end of the day, we're going to expose them all the way.
Okay. And Mark, just the last one for you. What would you like to see people doing to help your initiative to get material up on the internet? Is there something that people can do locally or across the country?
Well, we have meetings and we have demonstrations like the one we did recently on when we had Goose Fair and we walked down Mansfield Road. That caused such a delay and the police station was shut down only for the time we were there. Just come together, get there, make yourself known, because the more they see us coming together, in fact, that's one of the reasons they're so terrified. I mean, obviously, I've been exposing the council's corruption for a long time. Then it linked up with Mickey and Tom Crawford. In fact, when they did the police, the council and the corrupt courts came together to rob Tom of his place, we had a meeting afterwards. And in that meeting, which is available on the YouTube, Mark Salon with a C or Mark Salon with an S, you'll see the whole meeting. And I also put a separate part out. In that, I started the meeting off exposing the city council for being a dictatorship, which I've done on many times, and that was one of the videos that got taken down. I was pointing out that they were saying, and we got this from another insider from the council who wanted it known that they're not all as corrupt as the leader and the CEO, and they put out that it was basically turning into a dictatorship. And I was pointing out that in this document I'd got, it stated that if you didn't register, you would have your services stripped from you, much like it's happened to Mickey, where they've denied him his services. And I've been given this document recently, which is explains about if you don't register to vote, you're not going to get your services. Although they say it'll make for easier access for the city council services, it doesn't work like that. What it means is if you don't register to vote, if you aren't a good little slave, you won't get your services, including council houses, bus travel at cheaper prices, attending sports centres at discounts. That's not going to happen. If you're not a good slave and you're on the voters register, then you're not going to get these services.
Mark, very, very interesting what you're talking about there. I think this brings us into the city region realm. Perhaps we could get you on independently to have a chat about that. Just before we say thank you to both of you, Mickey, this is your Facebook page. I believe that you've got some video tucked away on here, which you're keen for people to look at.
It's my message for those at Nottingham City Council.
Okay, right. So we'll encourage people to go to visit Mickey Summers' Facebook and have a look at the information and the video clips on there. I'm going to say thank you very much to both of you for joining us. We need to move on through. If you're able to stay with us, that's great. But I'm a little bit of watching the time at the moment.
Yep, no problem. We'll be here.
Yep.
Okay. Well, of course, the British government spending billions on spying systems at the moment, but despite all of that expenditure, despite a huge upgrade and expansion of GCHQ, we're unable to track down paedophiles and those abusing children. But we can watch Citizens, I think, Mike, is that right?
Yeah, obviously this has been the sort of main topic of discussion over the last 24 hours in the mainstream media at least. Well, let's have a look at the nice friendly forward from the delicious Teresa there.
Steady.
Yeah. So anyway, Teresa's message yesterday was, don't worry, it's been going on for years, nothing to see here. And of course, all she was doing was, with her announcement yesterday, was to bring the law into line with events and requirements so that everything that has been going on for the last lot of years can continue to go on, but now it's legal. It wasn't before. We're not going to prosecute them for doing what they did, but we're changing the law so that it becomes legal now. That's good. Edward Snowden, at least, saw the irony to this. He tweeted out, there's a dark irony to Theresa May's admission today that the UK has secretly engaged in domestic mass surveillance since 1984, and then he put hashtag Orwell. Well, I predicted on yesterday's programme that someone was bound to trot out the old nothing to hide, nothing to fear line. So perhaps unsurprisingly, it was the MP for Gloucester, where GCHQ is based, who fell for it, and as a result drew the headlines with multiple comparisons to Joseph Goebbels. Nothing to hide, nothing to fear. Well, my point yesterday really was that it's that what's going on is continuous change in the relationship between the individual and the state. And I think this is the main story here. Because while the individual is expected to swallow the nothing to hide, nothing to fear rhetoric, like we're a herd of Bullingdon pigs or something, the state is not. So Chris Grayling seems particularly, as we mentioned yesterday, particularly scared of the Freedom of Information Act, claiming that journalists are misusing it. But surely, Mr. Grayling, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. And yet government seems to have lots to hide and lots to fear. We've got Broughton House here, Broughton House, children's home near Newark, record sealed for 75 years. We've got Caldwell House, children's home, Southwell, record sealed for 75 years. We've got Rose Cottage, children's home, record sealed for 75 years. We've got Beechwood, of course, record sealed for 75 years. Moorgate House in Rotherham, Working Girls Hostel in Sunderland, record sealed for 75 years. The list goes on. And surely if there's nothing to hide, then there's nothing to fear. And so who is responsible for sealing these records? Well, none other than Chris Grayling. And he is only the latest in a series of suspicious characters Jack Straw and Kenneth Clark were his immediate predecessors. Are they protecting paedophiles at the highest levels of the British establishment? Surely not. So, as I say, what's going on here is a fundamental shift in the relationship between the individual and the state, and I don't think this can be overstated. If these three stooges here want complete transparency with respect to individual privacy, because a few individuals represent criminality, terrorism, and the need to protect children, then surely there should also be complete transparency with respect to the many criminal, terrorist, and paedophile establishment figures, including their own colleagues and members of the royal family, who have inflicted untold wrongs on British children and Middle Eastern populations. If there's nothing to hide, after all, there's nothing to fear. Perhaps, Brian, it's appropriate that we're having this discussion on the 5th of November.
Well, it is. But of course, I can't imagine, Mike, that in the year 2015 anybody would consider blowing up the Houses of Parliament. I'm sure all of that sort of thing is in the past. Just in 30 seconds, Mickey or Mark, do you want to comment on those closed children's homes records?
Well, they're closing them for reasons, because as far as I'm concerned, we're just outed Alan Smith. We've just seen the name Kenneth Clark come up. And lo and behold, Kenneth Clark is a name that's been given to us that allegedly took kids from Beechwood Children's Home, which is named, down to a flat in London. We took it to the county council, who notified Superintendent Ellen Chamberlain and Nottinghamshire Police. Have we heard of Kenneth Clark being arrested? No. Right. We believe that the head of social services in Nottingham, right, is the link that is the reason why my case papers were meant to go to CPS 3 months ago, and they're still sitting there. We believe that Kenneth Clark may be the link, so Kenneth Clark, maybe he's got some answers that he can give.
Okay, right, thank you very much for that. Well, if we look at the close down of the media, I'm going to thank the people who alerted to us to this Russia Today video clip. This is back from 2014, but it was a German journalist and editor, Udo Ulfkott, and he was talking to Russia Today about the fact that basically Western journalism was being corrupted, journalists were being bought, paid for, bribed and indeed bullied by the security services. These are some of the things that he said Western news reports had made up, especially in USA and Britain. But he was also saying Germany as well. Journalists bribed, cajoled to report against Russia. CIA and German intelligence, and we was therefore put in British intelligence as well, were working what they called non-official journalists. So these were journalists in the pay of security services, but if anything went wrong, then the intelligence services were simply going to deny that. He talked about people being threatened if they refused to help. He mentioned in particular, I think they were called the Yellow Angels, but people who were there to do good works in the medical field. They were being brought into this, and he particularly talked about the Iraq sarin gas story, where he said, despite the fact he was there and reported on the reality, almost nothing appeared in the German and Western press. And he accused the effectively a CIA-backed media pushing for world war. So encourage you to go and have a look at that film clip. You can easily find it on YouTube, and I think it sets the scene for the fact that at the moment the British public and indeed public in countries overseas are being told a pack of lies by journalists and organisations such as the BBC who claim to be telling the truth. And I think that leads us nicely into Syria here, Mike.
Yeah, because government was tweeting this graphic out this morning, and I just thought, I thought it was quite interesting. So I had a chat with Vanessa Bailey about it, and she basically was making the point that this is classic NATO propaganda. They are saying here that, let's just run through their points. They're saying, who are the Syrian National Coalition? They represent over 70 Syrian opposition groups formed in response to the Assad regime's brutality, work for fair and free elections, removal of Assad's regime, and an end to the suffering of the Syrian people, are not seeking power. They plan to disband as soon as the fighting stops and political transition starts. The UK government has provided £3.2 million support to them since 2012, and you can read more at the SNC website. Now, Vanessa was pointing out that, of course, all the independent polls, even those that took place in Qatar, have consistently given Assad a very clear majority. She's making the point that Assad is already agreeing to new elections. She's agreeing that they should be United Nations controlled. And she's making the point this is possibly a masterstroke unless they're actually able to doctor the results in some way, which she doubts, because he's going to get an even greater majority potentially. And she's really questioning where this notion of 70 Syrian opposition groups and asking who they are. So, you know, there are many questions coming out of this, particularly the £3.2 million subsidy that this lot are getting. And the question is, are we really looking at the ISIS groups, Al-Qaeda and Al-Nusra here? Who are these 70 opposition groups? We'd like to know.
Well, we certainly would, Mike. Interesting that since Russian forces have been operating in Syria, and of course this shockwave has gone through Cameron, he's too scared to go back into Parliament for another vote on British forces in Syria. We are now starting to get truth bubbling up to the surface, so it's going to be interesting to watch. But on November the 5th, the UK column has got quite some headline, because we can reveal that a surprise government dossier is revealing links between Guy Fawkes and ISIS. So stay with us on this really shocking report. Obviously ISIS we're very familiar with, usually dressed in black and able to do anything, whether it's take over world internet facilities or invade the whole world. These are the people with that capability. Now, according to the government dossier, what has been happening is that ISIS explosives expertise has been moved through North Africa, and in particular the Moors, and ultimately saltpeter and sulphur supply routes have backed up the devious work by Guy Fawkes. So as Mark Salon said, sulphur is the hot topic, and David Cameron has been on BBC apparently warning the nation of more risks to security. So there we are, we live in very dangerous times on November the 5th. Of course, that report was not true. The government has in fact lost that ISIS Guy Fawkes dossier. Mark, sulphur, I said we would mention it for you.
Yeah, well, you can probably see I've got a little bit of a graze on my arm here. What happened was I watched a documentary called Got Sulphur. It's on YouTube, and it explains the benefits to sulphur, organic sulphur. Apparently it heals you from the inside out, and we're all lacking in sulphur. So this mark here may vanish. I'm taking sulphur, a teaspoon a day, a teaspoon twice a day.
And we've lost him. Okay, well, we'll leave Mark Salon on this. Okay, we've got you back, Mark.
Yeah, it's supposed to heal you from the inside out. It's supposed to make your hair return to its natural colour, scars heal, and make you fitter and healthier. So that is something I got recently, and I will be doing a video cast on that and let you know and see, hopefully, what happens with it. And of course, Guy Fawkes was the last honest man in Parliament. He said what he was going to do, and he tried to do it. It was only the rest that stopped him.
Indeed. Well, I couldn't imagine anybody would think about blowing up Parliament today. Well, let's have a look at the rise of the city-state, and what better place to go than The Guardian, which has been reporting on our very own Tudor Evans from Plymouth City Council, leader of Plymouth City Council. And this is a remarkable piece which I encourage people to read. It is just so utterly bizarre and unbelievable. But apparently Tudor Evans had said, let me tell you exactly what happened. On top of everything else, the government of the day decided to introduce privatisation into Devonport Dockyard, and within 18 months to 2 years, employment there was devastated. Well, of course, that's a part truth, because the dockyard was sold off for a matter of pounds in order to help corporate interests. But of course, it doesn't matter whether Labour or Conservatives have been involved. There has been a massive sell-off of British military infrastructure, and of course, as UK Column has consistently reported, decimation of the armed forces. Well, the other thing in the article is some statistics. In 1981, around 15,000 people had been employed at the local naval dockyards. By 1997, that was down to around 4,000. I think it's around 3,000 now. But of course, at the end of the Second World War, it was about 50,000. And for many years, up until about 1967, I think, we were even building ships in that vast 320 hectare naval base. So remarkable that the Labour administration should now be sad to have lost all this when absolutely nothing has been done to support industry and manufacturing in Plymouth in particular. And of course, there's comment there saying that Plymouth had horrific bombing from the Luftwaffe, which indeed it did. But what Mr. Evans doesn't mention is the number of dwellings pulled down subsequent to the Second World War by the City Council itself. But what is interesting about this Guardian article is if you have a look at the author, Mr. John Harris, his cities series of articles is actually supported by the Rockefeller Foundation. So, of course, this is a totally independent investigative piece by The Guardian. Well, of course, the Plymouth Herald was quick to pick up on it, and according to Tudor Evans, the solution to Plymouth's woe is that we need more rich people. Well, that is a bit rich coming from a Labour leader, but what is the logic of this man? Well, he says the proposition is, as well as everything else, in order to have a great manufacturing city, in order to be a great university city, in order to be a great anything city, you've got to be livable. And in the past, the cultural offer wasn't up to the mark. When I first came here, I saw 14 bands in 14 nights, including The Clash and The Stranglers. I couldn't do that now. There aren't those places. But there's still the appetite. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. The question is, why isn't it? And what can we do to make it happen? So it seems to be that Mr. Evans believes that to rebuild manufacturing and presumably industry, we need more pop bands such as The Clash and The Stranglers. Well, what sort of reality is this man coming out with? Well, I can tell you, because what we're dealing with is common purpose. And of course, common purpose embedded itself in Plymouth and literally took over the establishment. Let's have a look at this. This is a report of some dialogue between myself and the City Council. This was sent here. My predecessor and my head of performance and policy have advised you, for example, that the National Common Purpose Programme, which is designed to develop leadership across private, public and voluntary community sectors, is one of a number of initiatives through which the Council can develop the skills of its senior officers. Indeed, we have found that those who have graduated from the programme, that their renewed breadth of understanding of issues facing the local community in this context greatly assist them in their supporting and indeed developing such areas as community cohesion, renewal and leadership. It is absolutely vital, in my opinion, that if neighbourhood renewal and community leadership is to be sustained, it must come from within local communities. So let us just remember that the Labour leader Tudor Evans thinks that the way to get more manufacturing is to get more pop bands in. Well, where can we go? We can have a look at this leader here. It says, this was part of that document. It's my understanding, in order to create an atmosphere conducive to free discussion or exchange, all common purpose programme days and meetings are held in confidence unless explicitly stated otherwise. So you're going to have these discussions, they're going to be in confidence, and they're going to help us get more pop bands in to improve manufacturing. Well, this was a bit of a summary of the correspondence. And basically, the chief accountant said no separate records have been maintained of the costs of common purpose or the time spent by officers in attending or supporting this. He said it was not possible to identify the costs of these matters. So Plymouth City Council, in my estimate, spent somewhere at £100,000 on common purpose training, and that training appears to have said more manufacturing, more pop bands. So if we just have a look at this, since Tudor Evans was himself trained by Common Purpose, we've got Plymouth boasting some 275 Common Purpose type social enterprise organisations and charities, few of which deliver any tangible benefit to the people of Plymouth. But on the subject of money, we look at this from indeed the chief accountant of the council himself. As I said to you at our meeting, given that you've already been informed that no separate records have been maintained of the cost of common purpose or the time spent by officers in intending or supporting this, then it was not possible to identify the costs of these matters. So if we bring that forward on screen, there's that statement. You have already been informed that no separate records are being maintained. That letter went on to say this: the common purpose budget was removed as part of budget saving measures. So my question is, how do you reconcile this? There was a budget, but apparently there were no records as to how much money was spent through that budget. Anything to say on that one, Mike, at all?
It seems a bit incredible that you can have a budget which you can then withdraw, but you don't know what the budget was.
Well, that's what I feel, but let's remember Common Purpose, a political charity supported by Tony Blair's administration and now supported by David Cameron on a worldwide basis, spending public money in order to train future leaders, to bring in more wealthy people and pop bands to increase manufacturing production. I think we're well on the way to not surviving as a company, as a country, on the back of Common Purpose. No doubt they should get a few Common Purpose future leaders in to deal with strategic infrastructure like electricity.
Well, maybe they already have. Right, so yesterday we've been talking about the possibility or the reality of the fact that the National Grid or the UK is unable to generate enough electricity at the moment. Yesterday, the National Grid had to make an urgent request, apparently, for the generating companies to generate more power, and this is caused by multiple breakdowns at various UK power stations. The power companies were asked to supply some extra power in the late afternoon, what did they do? They took advantage of the situation. So to give one example, Severn Trent sold power to the National Grid at £2,500 per megawatt hour during that period, that compares with the normal price, which is £60 per megawatt hour. So they didn't take advantage of the situation at all. Now, what was done was that the National Grid put out a notification of inadequate system margin. That's called a NISM. They said this is one of the routine tools that we use to indicate to the market that we would like more generation to come forward for the evening peak demand period. The issuing of a NISM does not mean that we were at risk of blackouts. It means that we needed the safety cushion of power reserve to be higher. Is that not a risk of blackouts, Brian?
Well, in a common purpose sense, Mike,
Yes.
Yes or no.
Okay, so they're saying it was routine. So then what then happened was that they went on to issue a demand-side balancing reserve, and this is where they have manufacturing companies mainly that have signed up to an agreement with them that if they put out an emergency announcement at DSBR, that the manufacturing companies will start switching off equipment so that the demand is reduced. So that happened yesterday, but there is no danger of blackouts, of course. Now, bearing in mind that the UK population is about to rise by 10 million over the next 25 years, you would assume, would you not, that the government is planning for more power generation? Well, no, actually. The government has released this policy paper, the National Infrastructure Pipeline fact sheet, and that was published in July 2015. And of course, we are in the midst of the greatest privatisation in all history, according to Osborne. And we're going to use the money raised by selling off everyone to put into national infrastructure projects. So when you go and look at the spreadsheet that's provided as part of this policy paper and look at how much government money is going to be spent on electricity generating projects, guess how much there might be, Brian?
I'm going to guess at none, Mike.
None is the correct answer. So none. In the meantime, of course, our policy is that we're going to build more of these things, and it's going to be the private sector which is going to build them. So no public money going into power generation. Sorry, that's not quite true. Of course, there's quite a lot of public money going into a ridiculous deal on nuclear power, where EDF and the Chinese government are coming in and getting a strike price on electricity, which is double the current generating price. So that's a good deal for the country. But in the meantime, we're going to have these things. Now, as it says here, these things have a notional generating capacity, but in reality, they only generate about 30% of what that notional generating capacity is. And of course, in the winter, when we need electricity most, it's either too windy and they have to be switched off, or sometimes it's not windy enough and they don't work. And particularly cold, calm spells, of course, they don't generate any electricity at all. So we have no money being spent as part of this infrastructure plan for energy storage. So the question then has to be, what is it that the government knows about the next 25 years? We're going to have 10 million more people in the country, but we seem to not going to be needing any electricity generating capacity because we're shutting down power stations, not building anything to replace them with. So what is it that the government knows about what's coming in the next 25 years?
Mike, the answer to that is that industry and manufacturing in this country are to be completely closed if we allow David Cameron's common purpose to continue. This is where these ridiculous comments come from, that more theatres and creative drama is going to improve manufacturing. They don't need the power because they know they're going to get rid of the manufacturing. That's my opinion.
Completely agreed.
30-second
closing comment from Mickey or Mark.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that we had that last March where we called resignation of Chris Eyre. Well, we're actually meeting with Paddy Tipping, the Crime Commissioner, on the 20th. And Chris Eyre, we are coming for you. We're coming for your job for failure, like all the way through Operation Daybreak. 5 years, no one brought to trial. And as for Paddy Tipping, I think I'll leave the last few words about Paddy Tipping to Mark.
Well, as he said earlier, we've got a video where Paddy Tipping actually said he was going to have an inquiry, and he spoke for not just himself, but for the police and the county council and the city council, and that was dumped. It's just ridiculous. It's if it wasn't so serious, it would be the biggest joke there is.
I totally agree with that remark and the frustration behind it. Sometimes you want to laugh, you can't laugh because it is so serious. You have a radio programme starting, I believe.
Yeah, myself and Mark Frank Smith, we start on People's Internet Radio next Tuesday, the once-a-month show on Enemy Within, but our show is entitled One Step Beyond. We will go one step beyond. We're going to take controversial subjects and we're going to expose a lot of stuff, just the same as you guys do on the column. You know, maybe we can unite and get more messages across. Stop the sheeple, being sheeple, and make them become people. Open their eyes.
One final thing, the Rooftop Six are in court tomorrow.
Okay. All right, thank you for that. Thanks for joining us. And I'll just say to any of our viewers or listeners who are of a weak disposition that, of course, the statement that Guy Fawkes had been linked to ISIS and there was a dossier, that is incorrect. That is not true because that dossier has been lost. And we'll leave you on that happy thought while we celebrate November the 5th. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.